All right, so we might as well kick off. We've got a lot to cover today. We're going to be, welcome to my session talking about serverless with Firebase in the wild, and of course talking Firebase, we're going to be talking a bunch about Google Cloud Platform or GCP, because Firebase sits on top of Google's infrastructure. And I'll just say, I don't work for Firebase, I work for the government actually down in Canberra, but I love using their stuff, which is why I'm here talking about it, but everything I talk about is just my experience using it. I'm not paid to be here by anybody, and it's just a candid experience of what it's like to try and use Firebase. So my name's Duncan. Like I said, I just moved down to Canberra. I work as an Angular architect for the government, writing big monolithic Angular apps. And I do a bit of stuff on Pluralsight. I have about 6 courses on Pluralsight, mostly on Angular and Firebase. But before that, I was working for an Aussie company called SSW for the last few years as a kind of .NET and Angular consultant. Did mostly Angular, but a bit of .NET. So I was really comfortable in like the Azure space and .NET sort of world, but not so comfortable in a new world of kind of NoSQL and other things that I'll talk about. So I was working for this company for a bit of time, and before I worked for them, I wrote this application called Food Zone. And Food Zone is it's kind of a geeky application, a web app for nutritionists or health professionals who want to have like analytical data. They want to make a PDF that says, I had this much zinc compared to the government requirements. So we had a lot of students and a lot of dietitians using it. And we shipped it we built it in web forms, me and a friend, and we put it on our own kind of managed VM on AWS about 4 years ago now, kind of about that time. And we didn't do anything to it, we just let it sit there. And now people are complaining because it's web forms, and every time you search it refreshes, and it's this super clunky, horrible experience, and we've done nothing. And people, like I routinely get emails saying, I hate you're ruining my world and stuff. But they're really great emails and got me really inspired to go, well, people are that upset with me, maybe I should rewrite it. And we have about 10,000 paying customers. It's not enough for me to quit my job, and it definitely wasn't enough for both of us to quit our jobs. So I decided at the beginning of the year to buy out my partner in it and to rewrite it. So I've been looking for a stack to rewrite it in. And at the same time, about a year ago, I was writing a course for Pluralsight on AngularFire, and this was all about using their old database, the real-time database. And I was writing some small apps for work, and I was writing some small personal apps and starting to kind of do a deep dive on it. But I was really put off using Firebase because at the time, there was no way of doing kind of cloud functions, or there was no way of, and it was only the real-time database. And when you dive into it and you start using it, you're like, oh my God, the querying is terrible, it scares me. And I'm gonna have to stand up my own server anyway as soon as I need to do anything. So I kind of was put off, and I was not so interested in going too much further. But then they went, hey, we're gonna release cloud functions. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, that solves one big part of the problem. Now I can have like a node instance sitting there that I can do some work in. And then they went, oh, also we've released Cloud Firestore, and you start to get this feeling that Firebase is shipping lots of stuff, and they are. And the Firestore database solves some of the problems of having this like really complicated flat schema. You could now have collections and sub-collections. And also it was scaled better and was much better at querying. So it solved a lot of those problems. So I got a lot more interested at this point. And I kind of had a wish list for this app. So I really wanted to not do much work. I wanted to have auth and search as a service. I didn't want to pay for it. It was just going to be me and 3 buddies, put about $100,000 in to rewrite it over the year. So it's enough money that I don't want to lose it, but it's not like an enterprise application. I didn't have the manpower to do something crazy. And at the same time, I'm at work, and we're spending a good chunk of our dev time for our teams managing our infrastructure. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I didn't have the time and resources to do it. So I was looking for that to just be out of the box. Also, I was doing C# on the back end, and I was like, grass is always greener. I want to do TypeScript front to back. I want to have TypeScript on the back end as well. I don't want to manage any servers. I want minimal user support. I want something that's just going to look after itself. And I want to have something that can then progress into a mobile app, because that's probably, if we can rewrite this, because we're kind of locked in doing any new features in web forms until we rewrote stuff, then we might make some more money. And I wanted a really fast development cycle, and you'll hear me talk about this. I think it's going to be really fast the second time I write a Firebase app, but the first time there was a lot to learn. And I wanted to pay for usage because we had this VM sitting on AWS that was jacked up really high, because twice a year we had students process PDFs for their assignments, and we had to have it running really fast. And then the rest of the year it wasn't as busy. And you're like, well, you should just, this was 5 years ago or 4 years ago when we put it on there, and it was like everything was like, oh, we have to, if we touch one thing, we have to rewrite the whole thing. But it's one of the things we wanted, is the ability to just look after itself and scale. So I went and asked all my .NET friends, because that's who I was working with, all these enterprise architects, you know, thinking using Firebase, what do you think? And some of them are in the room, but not this person. And they're like, oh, I think your project's going to fail if you don't use .NET Core and Docker. Not because of your business model, but just purely because you're using something different that I'm comfortable with. So all my friends were saying, don't do it. You know, you should use what you're used to. You'll probably be faster. And they're probably right. I probably would have been faster. And also it probably would have been a bit easier to hire people and other things. And I think there's this, like, for my normal work where like there's teams of 20 people writing these apps, it's probably not the best solution in this country, because you've got to hire people and you're going to stand up your own infrastructure anyway. So, but, you know, I had a lot of people saying you shouldn't do it. But at the end of the day, I was still kind of like, well, even though I'm comfortable with Azure, I don't want to do it in their environment, because I looked at all their functions and everything. This was a year ago, you know, and they had everything I wanted, but it was kind of like typical Microsoft. It's like, here's the most badass tools, but I'll leave it to you to figure out how they all go together. And that's great, but I was like, oh, I haven't got the resources for it. I want something all in one box. So I decided to go all in with Firebase, and was like, yep, it's my business. You know, I want to do something fun at work. Don't get to choose as much, so I'm going to go Firebase. So really today I'm going to talk to you about, you know, our experience. We're about 9 months into this, about me and 2 other friends. And I'll talk about the things that I love, and I'll talk about the things that are just really quirky and confusing, which there's lots of. If you're used to a RESTful API with SQL, this is a different world. And the things that kind of made me angry. I'm not so angry anymore. I've kind of moved past that, but there's still confusing things, and I've learnt ways to get around some of the bits that are, you know, frustrating. But overall, I'm pretty happy with it. There's a lot of amazing parts in it, and it's just about getting used to that. So we're going to talk about what is serverless with Firebase. We'll talk about authentication and hosting, which are like the easy wins. We'll talk about all the persistent stuff. You know, what are your database choices? What about, you know, cloud storage? We'll talk about functions, which are just awesome and easy. We'll talk a little bit about DevOps and onboarding, like what's it like to actually have 2 people working on a project versus just 1 developer, and how do you do that with Firestore? And then the $1 million question, you know, would I do it again at this point? And we'll see. So, what is serverless with Firebase? So nice, strong, no wussy hands here. Who's actually used Firebase? Just gone into the portal and clicked around and made an app? Okay, probably close to half the room. So another strong hand, who's actually shipped something into production, big or small, that someone's actually touched and used? 1 person? Okay, normally, you know, I used to get really excited if it was 1 person. I'd be like, actually, there's another person. But now I'm getting used to seeing about 5 hands go up in the room, and they're not just Google employees. So you're starting to see more and more people use it. So you know, it's not just a super fringy thing, but it's kind of surprising. Why aren't more people using it? It's not like it's some fringy thing. It's owned by Google, and it does everything you want. Wonder. So what is Firebase? Today we're going to be talking about, you know, serverless with Firebase. And serverless is like a piece of spaghetti. You can't really grab it and say what it is. Everyone's got a different opinion. But serverless, today what I'm talking about is kind of like functions as a service, and having me not really care about all my infrastructure, and Google manages everything for me. So we're going to talk about the 3 things that Google does. They'll do build an app, they'll quality and monitor, and they'll do growth and analytics. And if you go to their website, these are kind of the things they say they do. I'm really focused on building an app today. And that's talking about hosting, authentication, cloud Firestore, cloud storage, cloud functions, and their new machine learning kit that you can use in the client as well. But they've got all this stuff for quality and monitoring you can use once you've actually getting close to shipping or have shipped. And once you have shipped, they've got this huge amount of services and tools for doing A/B testing and predictions with machine learning and cloud messaging, all this awesome stuff. But what really struck me out of this is these ones are only available for mobile. If you want to do any of these services, then you're going to have to be using the iOS or Android SDK. These things aren't going to be in your web. So straight away you can see where the sweet spot is and where all their focus and money is, especially when you go onto their homepage and they say, we're about helping mobile teams succeed. If you're thinking of doing a mobile app with Firebase, you're going to get a lot more stuff, and that's kind of, you know, one of its sweeter spots. We're not doing mobile yet, we're just doing the web, and that's mostly what we're going to talk about. Like, what would it be like if all the people except for this 1 person up the front was actually going to start writing all their data to Firebase and trying to solve all these business rules and business problems. And the other thing I hear all the time from people, and I'm sure a few of you would tell me this if we had a chat in the hallway, isn't it just for prototyping? I hear that all the time from people. And my experience has been definitely not just for prototyping. And if you look at some of the stats for Firebase, there's 1.2 million active apps a month currently. Yes, probably a lot of them are hello world looking at it from the hands in the room, but there's a lot of people using it more often. And there's 80 million new registrations of a user on somebody's application around the world every day. So it's getting bigger, and I'm seeing this slow traction where like 4 people put their hand up in a room like this every time I'm here versus just 1. So I think these aren't toys, and my experience has been that I wish they were a bit more like a toy, because I'm kind of back to where I was with the Microsoft stack, where they're quite powerful configurable tools that you have to learn and still take time in a real application, maybe a little quicker. So how does it work? Well, this is how it doesn't work. If you're doing your normal thing with a RESTful database, you'd talk to your services, your API, and that would talk with your database or your blob storage, and you'd talk back to your APIs, and that would pass it back down to your client, your websites and your phones. But that's not how you do it with Firebase. With Firebase, you spend most of your time connecting to the database directly with WebSockets, and it's super easy to do. And then you've got a NoSQL database, and you've got cloud storage, which is like blob storage, videos, images, that sort of thing. And you set up a connection. And you've got all these security rules to be able to talk just straight to the database. And you check those in when you check in your code, and they live with the database. So you're talking mostly directly to and from, and these rules are kind of awkward. I'm not all rosy about everything Firebase. But you get a lot of cool things in this scenario as well, being all these libraries you get to use. So they've got instantly, if you want to have for web as well as iOS and Android, you can have offline persisting. So as soon as you get back connected, it will just sync up all the data that you've been doing offline, and that just comes for free. So there's a lot of really big benefits you get when you buy in, and you pretty much are buying in. But there's also cloud functions, and these are pretty much Node and Express. If you're used to that, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get kind of an ability to have routes into some work that you can do in a node. And most people are going to choose TypeScript. You can choose JavaScript if you want. So if I hit my database, that can trigger some work to be done in a function. And then you can write back to your database. But you can also, anything you can npm install in here you can use. So we're using Algolia for search. We're using Stripe for payments. And anything you can pretty much HTTP to, you can connect to. So this is kind of the thing that was missing, and now it's just like having your own backend as a service. But you can also just talk straight to these functions and just HTTP to them and get a response as if you're talking to your own API. And in the end, you're kind of doing this mix match of all these different things, and the whole thing works quite well together, and it's pretty easy to do a lot of this stuff. So what's it look like when you actually get into it? Well, you come into the console, you say, I want to make a new project, and you go, I'm going to give it a project name of NDC Oslo, what my second favorite conference after this one. And then you can say, which region do you want? And then you go, well, of course I can choose regions. I've got Google here. This is the power of Google. You can choose, like, I've got to get something for giving them my money. So I'm going to choose Norway to host this in. But I could choose Australia as the region. So you spin that up and you get it, and then you're in the cloud. You can't work at your desk. You have to work here, like you're working at your desk, but if you're not connected, you're on the plane, you're going to only be writing tests. And I'm not going to talk about all these different tabs down the side. There's lots of different features. I'm just talking about the develop stuff. What's it like to persist it, trying to do these business queries and host it and functions and stuff. You can choose a database. I'm going to say I'm going to choose the new database, the cloud Firestore database. It's going to say, do you want to leave it open? I'm like, why are you even asking? But here's these dumb rules. I'll get back to them. They're not dumb. They're just not my favorite. And then it will spin up and you're away. And then you've got, here you are, you're in your database, there's no data. This is a document database, no SQL. So it's all based on collections and documents and sub-collections. And I'll talk more about that. But this is in beta, yeah? And people often ask, oh, do you get much outages and downtime and so forth? No, well, it's Google. You get kind of the normal what you would expect. It's quite good. I haven't experienced too much problems. But we haven't yet shipped, so can't give a proper answer to that. But it's in beta. I hope they don't just change everything on me before we release. But I've got a feeling they won't, because this is kind of them taking their normal document database and then making it work with Firebase. And now they're saying this is going to be their only document database for Google. So it's pretty robust. And everything else is kind of out of beta now. Functions are out of beta and so forth. So I can say I want to make a collection of foods, and then I'll let the ID for the document here be open. And then I'm going to say I'm going to have a name field on this document because it's a food, and I'm going to say its value's apple. and then I push save and it's done. So that you're not going to work in here, but you've got this access to it to see it. And being real time, all this stuff, you can watch it change colors as your users are actually editing and doing things and so forth. So you end up in this kind of collection document pattern. Here's the auto-generated ID and then the fields in your document. So if I want to use this, I can choose like iOS or Android, but I'm going to choose app. And then it's just going to say, here's the keys you need. These are the public keys to stick on your website. And then that's going to allow you to connect. You've still got to authenticate and everything. And here's your CDN. But you're not going to use a CDN like just a script tag to get your JavaScript and just start typing. You're probably going to use one of the many different frameworks or libraries that exist with Firebase. So we're using Angular because I like Angular. But you've got Polymer Fire and Ember Fire, and there's a React Fire, and there's Flutter Fire. Who's heard of Flutter? Okay, interesting. Okay, who's heard of Xamarin? Almost everybody. So Xamarin's like Flutter for Google. So Flutter is, you write Flutter and Dart. I don't know, it's not TypeScript, it's Dart language, and it compiles down to the other things. And that's one of the, I think, the exciting things about Firebase is it comes from Google, and they've already got this whole library of tools to write one app in Flutter and compile it down to native iOS and Android and have a great Firebase experience. Fingers crossed. So that's kind of what we're looking at there, and we're going to kind of step through some of the parts of Firebase that are, good and bad and the ugly. So authentication hosting is definitely the easy win. This is where you just motor along and things are great. So we're going to talk about these two things, and you're going to save so much time. These are the things you're going to love. So with Firebase hosting, it's on Google Cloud Platform. They're content delivery network, static assets around the world, super fast, super cheap, kind of end of story. You just win. And it's really good. So you come into the portal and you go, I want to do hosting. And this is the beginning of your journey getting their NPM install of their tools. So once you've got these tools, you can go over to your terminal and your machine, say NPM install my Firebase tools globally. And this is how you interact with everything. Same in your continuous integration and so forth. You got a nice command line. They're always updating, and it's really slick. So I can install these tools, and it will tick away. And then I can say, okay, I've got these tools installed. I want to do a Firebase login. Takes me out to the browser. I say use my Google account here, and then it goes, boom, you're done. So it's super quick, super easy, but you kind of don't want cute, huh? You want something that goes a bit faster than, I'm more concerned with what happens when we're months into using this, which is where we are. But it continues to be this slick. So once I've got it, I can say, okay, Firebase init, make me some static hosted site. And it's going to say, what do you want to do? Because it doesn't know yet, which part of Firebase I want to use, the database, the functions. I'm going to say I want hosting. And it's going to say, choose a project. This is a dummy account. I've just got my Oslo project. And then it's going to say, where do you want to stick all of your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to host? And you say, just put it in a public folder. And it's going to say, do you want me to set up rewriting rules if you're using a single page app so deep linking works? And you say, yeah, that sounds good. And then it's done. It gives you something like this. Now it's just your job to stick all of your static assets in the public folder and then run a simple command, which is Firebase Deploy, and then it's going to be done. And it's going to stick it on whatever URL is associated with this project. So it literally takes about that time too. I mean, I'm just clicking through slides, but it's similar sort of timing. And here's the website with this URL. And you notice you get HTTPS by default. We wanted lots of different things. We wanted to have foodzone.io, app.foodzone, blog.foodzone, test.foodzone, and help.foodzone. And it took about an hour to get all of these synced up, just serving an index page with nothing else there. So this stuff's just super easy to do and really fast. And the command that I wrote in the terminal is just the same command I run in continuous deployment, and it just works, with a key, of course. So that's the hosting side. It's just easy, but we're moving through the good and we're going to get to the ugly. And talk about authentication. So there's all these providers. You can do phone, you can do Gmail, Facebook, anonymous, and then convert them to a known user. All these things, really easy. And they're always shipping stuff. This is just one of these blog posts I'll show you today. They're always shipping new things all the time, almost feels weekly. And one of the problems we had is you would log in and then you'd get the user back into the site and then would have to make another request back to Firebase to get all of the rules for that person because there was no claim system. So they went, oh, let's just fix it and write a claim system. So now what happens is we talk to our functions, and this kind of gives you a feeling for what your day-to-day will be like. Make a request out to a function, and I call this set custom user claims, pass in the user ID and a couple of things that I want to put on the claim. You can't put too much yet because it's going to go on the header of every request. And then that will update and manage that because it's authentication as a service. It will just manage that until I change and call that function again in my secure cloud function and update those claims again. So any request or any data I get coming down to that authenticated user is going to have that information there, and I don't have to do this double network stuff. So then I can just read that out and go, what plan are they on and when does it finish? So this is kind of an example of using Firebase, but also like they're shipping stuff all the time, and a lot of the quirks that we've had problems with, every week there's something new and it improves. So they also ship something for doing better arrays. Before you couldn't search an array. So you have a document that has an array in it with like 2 strings and you just want to search if one of those strings is there. You couldn't do that. They were like, oh, it has to be a map or a dictionary. And then they fixed that. And then they're like, oh, we're also going to allow you to use, you know, Node 8, and they fixed that. And we're going to allow you to like configure where you want to have your functions in the world just right there where you're writing your functions. So they fixed that. And this is literally just goes on. And like we're going to have in-app messaging, and this is only like since I was in Oslo a few months ago. And then we're going to allow you to have multiple sites in one project. And then we're going to allow you to export to BigQuery some extra special things. Then we're going to have history for your remote config, which is one of the mobile things. And then we're going to release a .NET SDK. I think that was 2 weeks ago. And then they're like, oh, we're going to have multi-tab offline support because previously they just had, if you were doing offline, you only had, if you had 2 tabs open, it would warn you and say, oh, I'm not going to sync. And now they fixed it. So hopefully you get the idea here of all the stuff they're shipping. It's just like constantly next, next, and next, and they're shipping new features all the time. Okay. So let's just run through what it looks like to use some of this stuff. So I'm going to say I want to use email and password so they can register the normal way, and I'll enable that. And I want to use Google because that's easy. I'll just click the box to enable that. No special, hey Google, you already know who I am, just let me do it. And then I can go use one of those libraries, and I'd have code like this. I'm using the Angular library here for it. So in my constructor, I bring in Angular Fire, and then I can just call a login method and say this.af.auth, sign in with pop-up, and I want to new up an auth.google provider. It will open up the Google for me in the window. I say yes, log in. If I'm new, it creates me. If I'm not new, it logs me in. Super easy. And if I want to log out, it's just as simple. And the whole time my session's going to manage the state of my user with Firebase. Excellent. But then it gets even better with Firebase because you've got things like Firebase Ui for web and for mobile. And you can go, well, I'm not going to write any of that because even though it's easy to write a login flow and a reset password flow and emails and all the best usability and everything, why not just let them do it? So they've got this library you can go get, and it will manage all my login screens, my registration screens, my like Google and Facebook and password and knowing and everything, and do all the UI too, so I don't have to write that UI. So this is an example of what our site looks like at the moment. If you come in, it's kind of midway through this GIF, so let it start again. But basically, you'll come into the site, and it's not going to know who you are. This is registering a user. Registers them, and then you're into the app. So this is it starting again. If I choose email, it's going to go enter your email. I don't know if you're an actual customer yet. So it goes, matches the email and goes, no, I don't know who you are. And it goes, cool, give me your first name and last name because I want to register you. Give me a password. And then you're registered. And then you're signed into the app and it manages everything. I didn't have to write any of that UI. All the spinning logos, all the validation, the asynchronous validation out to check the email. Just save like what? It's probably at least a 3 days work for an Angular developer and then the back end. So it's pretty cool. So let's move on to talk about persisting data. Like what's it like writing to NoSQL database? Who here would say they're more comfortable with SQL versus NoSQL? Okay, most of the room. Who's here more comfortable with NoSQL? Oh, okay, there's a fair few people in here. All right, interesting. For me, coming from .NET land, you know, I'd done some NoSQL, but not a lot. So this was our like deep dive for the 3 of us because I hired my friends who are also .NET developers to do it. So we'll talk about Cloud Firestore mostly, but there's 2. There's still the old one, the real-time database. And you might actually still want to use that. If you're going to be doing heaps and heaps of reads, it's going to be cheaper just on the payment model that they have. or if you're going to be managing like presence in your app, like multiple users editing one thing on the page. But for almost all of us, we're going to use the new one because it scales better and it's got a logical schema structure and the querying's better. And for most of us, we're querying data a lot, so that's going to be the one you'll use. So what is it? It's a cloud Firestore is what it's called. So it's a big bag of words here. It's a horizontally auto-scaling, I don't care, just make it work Google database. But the most important thing for me is it's a NoSQL document database, which has caused me lots of pain as I have to learn how to do that. And also, be more careful with our data. And it's in the cloud. They manage everything. That's where it is. That's what you're going to get. So it looks like this. You're going to have a collection of users. If you're used to Mongo or something like that, this will look familiar. So I've got collections, documents, collections, documents. So I've got a collection of users, for example, and then I could have a single document underneath that collection of Duncan. Then another document of Sarah. But Sarah might have her own sub-collection of followers. And inside that collection of followers, I have another document that's Ryan. And when you query, you can query shallow. So if I queried for my followers collection at the bottom here, I would have to get everything from there down. Whereas now you can query and you just get from that collection. So it's a bit easier to use for this reason. And for the other reason, I would have to have this big flat structure and everything would just be a collection on the root, and it was just difficult. But it's still difficult for us. Like, you have to code much more defensively with NoSQL, and you have to spend a lot more time thinking about what you're doing. And I don't have all the tools that I'm used to and to be able to design and schema these. So this is just us some scratch padding going, okay, these are roughly all the paths we're going to have for a user. And then these are like roughly us just sketching in our brains as we do as a team to try and figure out how we're going to design it up front. Because you've got to do a fair bit more work up front to think about what you're going to do and how it's going to denormalize and where you're going to get stuff. And I find like my brain has to work about 50% harder when I talk about NoSQL, maybe sometimes 110%. You can hear the fans going on. So it looks like this. You're going to have a collection. Like, this is just an example of one of ours. We're a food database and people have health actions. So I go db.collection. I want to grab a collection. So I want to go into this collection of health actions, and then I want a document of user ID, and then its sub-collection of food databases. So for each food database, you have health actions. And then grab that actions document, and then it's got another sub-collection of raw actions, and then some of them are kind of like formatted actions. So we end up in this structure where you're going down like so. And then these are obviously duplicated data a lot of the time because you're in NoSQL, so you've got to also manage which other part of your database have you also saved this data in, and keep that in context and manage it. So once I've done that, I can go .where, in between this date range, and health action type equals food, because I want it not exercise. Then I can go .get, and this .get looks really boring here. You're just like, oh yeah, you're going to get a response. No, I'm going to get a WebSocket. This is AngularFire, and it's an observable, and anytime someone updates the database, it'll just push down to here. And if it's an edit, I know. If it's a delete, I know. And if it's a brand new one, I know. And if I want all of them, I can ask for all of them, or just individual updates. So you can write really, really granular performant front ends, because you can just go, give me everything, and then I don't have to recollect the whole collection again. I can just manage the updates and edits and just get them as pieces as the life of the user's journey. But this ain't SQL, and I think this is one of the really big decisions. You have to I wish someone sat me down, or I wish I'd listened, and said, you really want to do this? Like, do you really want to have your primary data store as NoSQL? There's no reason you can't. You're just going to have to change the way you do it and really understand what you're doing, plan up front, be much more defensive with your coding, and take responsibility when you write to the database that you're doing things correctly. Whereas relational database, you can kind of just, all my friends are going to look at me funny, you can just switch off and just program and search Facebook and make sure that it don't get any errors, which is great. Okay, but it's super fast. So that's one of the benefits of doing Firestore and these things. And it's an interesting thing to see that, you go DynamoDB on Amazon, or you go Cosmos DB for Azure, or Firestore for Google. They're all making these no document databases because they horizontally scale and they can give you all this amazing performance. And Firestore is pretty cool. There's some cool things about it. So imagine I had a collection with just 10 documents. If I want to get 5 of those documents, or however many documents I want to get, that's what dictates how long it takes to get it, not the size of my collection. So if I have millions of documents in a collection, For me to get 5 is the same time as if I only have a small amount. So the cost, the time and the cost of getting things is based on how much it gives you back. Because they index like crazy, and there's a whole bunch of indexing you can manage, but they auto-manage it as well. And it's quite smart. So what about full text search? I promised I was going to just not be a fanboy. But full text search just doesn't exist. Like, there is no full text search. If I want to search for a food, and I want to search for red and then half of the word apple, I just can't do that. And you're like, really? Like, even if it was slow, come on, at least let me do that. But no, you can't. And if you go onto their website, they'll say, Cloud Firestore doesn't support native indexing or search for text fields in documents. And if you want to make jokes with me about Firestore versus Azure later, you'll probably win on this one. But additionally, downloading the entire collection and then searching the entire collection is not a good idea. You're like, duh. So you should use something we haven't built called Algolia, which is a paid service. So you're going to be in the same boat. Almost every app's going to need some sort of basic search, if not advanced search, and most of us will use Elastic. But it is also a win as well. Algolia is just fantastic. I really like Algolia, but I have to pay for it. It's $50 a month at the moment. As soon as we go into production, we're probably going to have at least a few 100,000 records in our search indexes, and that's probably going to scale up to $200 really quick, which is going to cost me more than Firestore, who gave me as much money as I can spend in the first year. They were like, here's as much, you're a startup, here, have heaps of money. Can't buy, I should sell it to someone to Bitcoin mine, but I don't know if I can take that out of the recording. All right. So it's also, these use cases are really good examples of how you actually, your day-to-day stuff, these different ways of thinking in a serverless way. So I've got my connected client, and I can talk to Algolia, and I've kind of got search anywhere on the planet, less than a second, fantastic, and they charge for it. But if I want to go to my cloud function, because I need to go to my Firebase to get the rules this user can see, which things can they search, and I can't just leave that open, so then I'm going to have to go back to my function with those rules, and then out to Algolia, and then back to a function, and then back to the thing. Each one of those arrows, especially on a cold start of a function, because they heat up, is probably half a second. So I don't want to search Apple and then results. I just want to go Apple and results. That's what all of us would want. So Algolia allow you to call a function, and this is where you'd see if you didn't have functions, this wouldn't be achievable. And the function, I npm install Algolia, and it gives me a way to make a token, and I'll show you what the code looks like in a second. And then I stash that on the client for a week. Like, it lives for a week. If it's not there, it will make a new one. And then when I search out to Algolia, now I pass in that key and I just go straight back to the client. I don't have to talk with the function for another week to update it. And now I've got search under a second, and all of my clients' private stuffs are also indexed, and everything's super fast all the time. But you have to work for it, and I had to go figure all that out. It's not very complicated, and Algolia kind of will tell you what to do, but you still got to go do it if you're not used to the new stack. So this is Algolia's index, not Firebase's. And this is just one document in there, and you can see I've got this viewable by property, and this is what they encourage you to do. And here it says everyone in an array, and this kind of was annoying, because remember before I said Firebase won't let you have a searchable array. So if I kept this copied also in Firebase, I had to turn it into a map and have this. Well, they fixed that. So here I've got this viewable by everyone, but if I put just the user's ID in, then that token will know about it, and only a token with a specially hashed ID can get this single item out of the search. So you don't have to fully understand it, but it works quite well. And this is the function that you'd write. So if you're used to doing Node and Express, you kind of have this wrapper over Node and Express when you use a function, but you can also just use it like this, where you have the normal syntax of a callback with a request and a response. And I'm used to like that. And this is /key. So this is the route, the Express route that I'm using in the function. So if I've got related work to do in a function, I'll actually ship almost like a controller in .NET with multiple routes in one function. But most of them just have one route, and you do one thing, or one trigger from the database and you do one thing. So here I'm going to say, make me a valid until for just 7 days, just a date, and then make me some params that I'm going to then pass to Algolia to make a key. And the important thing here is this viewable by. So this person is going to have this token that says if their ID is on a food, or the food says everyone can see it, then they're allowed to see it. So I then just go, hey, I've npm installed this client and registered it from Algolia. Then I can execute
the generate secure API key, pass in my information, and then it's just what you used to return res.json. And it's not much to learn if you know Node here. It's really nice. Like, it's just one-to-one of most of your skills, except they only last 9 minutes. So security rules, oh man, they're frustrating. Like, if you try and use them wrong, which I think I was doing. So this is what it's like. You go database, click rules, and you got this long list of rules, just one file per database. So you can imagine this is going to get quite out of control. And you write them on in your IDE and you check them in. You can check them in on here, which they shouldn't let you because you'll get it out, go crazy. But you can check them into your source control and it works. So this is all based on you going, there's a path in my document database and I'm going to write a rule, kind of like a JavaScript expression that has access to check the database in a secure world. Like, you can't get to this from the browser. And I can configure read, write, and edit rules and so forth. And they're not too bad, but the problem is when you've got like duplicated data in the database and you've got a user that's being followed and is following and has custom foods and other things, and their username's duplicated in all those places, and then you go, okay, I'm going to try and be super smart and also write just straight to Firebase versus going via a function. And then you have to write these super complex rules, and it just becomes impossible, and the rules have no way to set a breakpoint and hit them. You have to check it in, deploy it, hit it. Oh, got it wrong. Okay, write it, check it in. Ah, got it wrong. And the error, what you get back is useless. And I'm probably upsetting some of the team, who I also think are amazing. And they've got this simulator there. That makes things a lot better. You can actually go into the portal, but I'm a developer. I want to do it in code and set breakpoints. And so I can come in here and do this. But really, this led to us as a team going, okay, as a policy, what we're going to do is, I'll show you this quickly before I talk about that. But so this is using an extension in Visual Studio Code. And these are our rules here on the right. And these rules, you can see, just keep going. And I got syntax highlighting here, but I have no auto format. I can't format this. I got no tooling if I've made an error, and all those spaces and tabs is me just being careful. So hopefully this gets better. But they're your rules, and they work. But for the reason that they're tricky, what we do is we don't, if we're going to do something difficult with rules, we don't write straight to Firebase. Every read goes straight from Firebase because we want it to be super fast. So we do all our reads coming from Firestore. Everything comes in. We've got these security rules, and the security rules aren't too bad for reads because you've probably denormalized your data. You're never joining across different collections because that's going to be slow. You always denormalize into one collection. And then if we've got something we want to write in that's difficult, something that needs to know which user knows who and so forth, then we go to a cloud function where you're God and you've got complete control. You're in a secure environment, and Firebase doesn't care what you write. It's not going to check the rules. You can just clobber it. And that's good, and that's what we want. And as soon as I write back to the Firestore, it's a WebSocket, and it goes back around, and you're happy again. But you're going to have to fan out your data all the time, so it's not that simple. You're probably going to be writing to several spots in your database when a NoSQL database. So you're probably going to find yourself in a similar pattern where you decide 80% of your edits and writes, you'll go to a function first. User doesn't know because you can be smart and just give them the data straight away, and it's a WebSocket, so if it's wrong, it'll reverse itself and you can optimistically update. It's quite good. All right, functions. The functions, you've seen a little snippet of them. They're pretty awesome. I think you can get them in Python now, but previously it was just mostly with TypeScript and Node. And if you want to have them, again, you can start in here, and it's going to say you've got no functions. So you can then go to your command line utility that you've already got, and you can say, hey, initialize a function for me. I want to Firebase init functions. And it's going to say, do you want it in JavaScript or TypeScript? And you'll say, hell yeah, I want it in TypeScript. I'm not going back that way. I want it in TypeScript. And I'm all in, so give me TS-lint and make it a bit stricter. I've only probably got 100 lines of code there because it's a function. And then it's going to write me a few files and set me up just a small little node to be able to do a little bit of work. And then it will npm install everything, and you're done, and you can say, okay, cool, open it in Visual Studio Code, and it looks like this. So this is great, and it works really well, and they've already gone and made you a scripts object in your package.json that you can fire these scripts, and it will do all the compilation and stuff. I don't touch any of these. The linting rules are pretty much what we want. I've not really done much here and it's been quite good. And we just run serve from our continuous deployment and it just works. Except for one thing. What we did find is we didn't want to have 200 folders of 200 functions sitting in one folder called functions. We wanted to have some sort of naming and convention and so forth, because it's just going to end up being this huge list, and we wanted to share the node modules folder and so forth. So this is what you'd get. You'd just get a single source folder and an index file, but we didn't want to have it this way. You can see here just a simple function that it hello worlds for you. What we wanted to do was have it a little differently. So we started searching online trying to find an answer for this, and we found this person's post, which I see is about a year old now, and it's still what we're doing. We set it up once and it's been great. And basically we went, okay, we're going to follow this convention. There was a lot of conversation on GitHub around which ways do people like it. And so we've got this script here on the right, but you can see our folder structure here on the left. So I've got a functions folder, and inside of there I've got the node modules and the other stuff you need. And then the source folder has many functions in it. So we've separated them out into the functions related to authentication, functions related to database triggers. So if the database is the one just updating and then calling a function, they go in there. Or if they're HTTPS, so if we're calling them directly from our site or from some other service. So if I open the HTTPS ones here, you can see a bunch of examples, and they've got this really weird suffix on the end of .f.ts. So that's the weird hack that we did to make this work. So then we've got this small little script on the side that says, find anything that's got a .f.ts and make it a function and deploy it. And here, so we'll go HTTPS is the folder name / Algolia will be the function name. So it's going to go make functions for all of these, HTTPS / coupon, HTTPS / delete - test - users, and so forth. We set this up once, it's great, it's just worked for us and it's been really good so far. But there's no Firebase docs for this, and their docs are amazing, but this stuff's just something we came up with. 9 minutes, it's all you got in a function. 9 minutes, you're out. And you can wind them up and have them more memory and so forth, but you've got to get everything you want to get done in 9 minutes, which most of the time is really easy. But for us, we had one thing where we wanted to be able to get people to submit Excel spreadsheets, because that's what they worked with, these academics. And they would have like 30,000 foods in there, and it would be like 80 different columns in Excel. It would parse the Excel and relate all the things into a JSON object, and then save it into Firestore. So I thought I'd be smart and go, oh yeah, I'll do this in a function, but I can't actually get it done in 9 minutes. So I'm going to write my own little utility where I'm going to have a whole bunch of steps, and I'm going to use Cloud Firestore documents to manage these steps, where I'll kind of like a workflow or a queue. So I've got a clean, a custom, a delete, a process, and an upload, and they all talk to each other, and it was a real deep dive for our team. Like we went like 2 weeks on this. And we had to all get really, really good at understanding the limitations of both storage and the database, because we couldn't get it all done in 9 minutes. So we would read it all out of the Excel and JSON, and then we'd start saving it to Firestore. And Firestore's like, you can't save that fast. You can't batch that big. And we're like, oh, and you get these like really highly technical terms that you need to be a DBA to understand. You look them up and you're like, okay, I need to make smaller batches, make another step. So we learnt lots. We became kind of much better at node and async await and communicating between lots of things. We got to the end of it and it was pretty bad code, and but we hung it together and we got it there. And then someone gave us an Excel spreadsheet that took more than 9 minutes to parse, and we couldn't even get through the first step, and we had to redo it. And we're like, at this point we're just like, we're not serverless anymore. We're going to stand up a node instance and just screw this serverless stuff, because it's just too hard and we're going to burn our money. And that's what we did. So there's better ways of doing this now. We haven't stepped into doing this. It's like a small feature for us, so we're not so worried about having this sit here. And but you know, there's Kubernetes as a service and other things coming down the pipeline we might look at to be able to deal with that 9-minute limitation. DevOps. So we're getting to the end of this story here. So I just want to show you what it's like. It's not much of a story. It's just kind of what you would expect. But onboarding people and dealing with developers is a bit different than you used to, so I'll talk about that. So we use Circle CI. We could have used Jenkins, or what's it called now? Visual Studio Online's just renamed to Azure DevOps. Could have used that. I really like that. But it wouldn't really matter which one you use. As long as you install the terminal command line tool, you're good to go. So we use Circle CI, and this is just kind of a fake-ish sort of command YAML file that we have. So we'll say, give us node 9 and give us a container, go get our repository in the first couple of lines. And then my first command is going to be deploy to Firebase hosting. So I've already run a step to compile the assets I want to deploy. But then I go, okay, cd into my app/foodzone app, and then run Firebase Deploy just like I would from my own terminal on my own machine, pass in a which project and a token. And that's it. So it's not too complicated. You've got a whole bunch of things though, environment variables you're going to need to punch on to your functions though, and they need to be set. So this one's a bit more complicated. So configure my cloud functions. So cd into the folder, and then go get all my keys out of my environment variables for Algolia and punch them on and configure this function or this environment for functions. Stripe tokens, Gmail passwords, and so forth. And then the final one, I just say deploy, and then it's pretty simple. So it's not too complicated a deal to do this sort of stuff. If you like these sorts of things, you'll find it's trivial. So what about onboarding new developers? I really don't want them to be like this, which is almost impossible in this country. I really want them to be like this, and I definitely don't want them to be like this because I can't afford to pay them as much as Google might pay them or other companies, so I've got to try and keep them with fun because we're a startup. So in that sense, how do I get them to stay being happy developers and onboard them in that way? Because I don't think I'm going to be able to hire someone off the street very easily who knows all this stuff. And then you also have all these kind of different ways of doing stuff because it's not a RESTful API with SQL. So normally what we do is it probably costs about a day to onboard someone, and that's not to get them through the full experience of understanding it, but it costs me a day. I'll sit with them and we'll make a ticket and we'll outline all the things we need to do. But there's no script I can run that's going to automatically spin up a new project in the cloud for me. I have to go in there with them and click on it and say, make you a dev environment, and come up with a name like developers name -dev, and that's their project, so they can go clobber it, not clobber, test or prod. And then we have to go configure Algolia and all those bits, which is not so bad. They kind of learn on the job. So we go do all those things and tick it off, and then they check in some trivial thing and it goes through into production. But it takes about a day, but then it probably takes like any stack, like whatever you think is normal for someone learning a new stack to get up to speed and be self-sufficient, it probably is weeks, like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, so forth, just like what you'd expect. But my friends who are doing it with me actually like it now. I've definitely had a lot of complaints on the way around NoSQL. Why aren't we using SQL? And oh my God, I can't do this. And some of the conversations we have make our brains go hot, like this stuff about security and sharing data and security rules. And we'll have a reverse lookup we'll save like all the things they're able to see here, but then we'll have a master copy over here. But the person they're looking at also has them in their list. We have to denormalize to all those spots, and how will we do it? And our brains sit there and go hot. But most of the time they're pretty happy. So would I use it again? Would I use Firebase again? Because I got asked by my brother, funny enough, oh, you should come work for us the next 2 years and do a project, and you can choose whatever stack you want. You'll probably have about 10 devs. And I'm like, oh, wow, I've just burnt time and money doing this in Firebase. Do I want to spend the next 2 years doing it? And is it going to be the right fit for 10 people in a team? This would be sitting in Vietnam doing it. And I kind of think yes and no. I think it's a unanimous yes for a bunch of different things and a unanimous no for others. So I think if you're doing mobile, then it's really quite easy, quite clear. Yes, this is going to be awesome, especially if you're doing something where you're selling to consumers and you want to incentivize and push messages and analyze and do A/B testing and all that sort of stuff. Then I think it's going to be great. If you're working in Canberra like I am, and there's like heaps of us and we're migrating like legacy through to new, then no, I don't think it's going to work. It's all cloud and cloud only. If you're a team of 5 people and you're used to .NET, yeah, I think it would work, but you're probably going to pay on the first round getting up to speed, but then you'll be probably slightly faster on the second round. So yeah, I think it definitely has a spot. And I'm really excited moving forward for us because everyone's doing the same thing going, you can't use Flutter, Duncan. It's going to fail. You should use Xamarin and you should, stick it on Visual Studio. But I'm probably going to use Flutter and just go all in again. And this one's probably even more fringy. But it's going to be great because we're going to have all this Firebase stuff that's going to integrate really well, and hopefully we get some benefit from that. So where to from here? If you're sitting in this room and you're thinking, all right, I want to go get more information around this, there's great docs you can go onto the Firebase site, and it's excellent. They hire professional writers. That's like you would expect from anywhere, whether you're on the Microsoft Docs and so forth. And their YouTube channel is fantastic. And they're really putting a lot of effort in here. And they're starting to get to a robust point where they're starting to get like, let's make advanced content on here. So I really like their Firebase stuff. They're always releasing, you know, some of them are an hour-long live coding session with some of the team, and it's great. So in summary, we had a look at what is serverless with Firebase. We had a look at authentication and hosting, how that stuff's just awesome. We looked at Cloud Firestore and some of the quirks and NoSQL things and servers, serverless, Algolia. We looked at functions and how they're more like butter and awesome. DevOps. And yes, I would use it again, and I'm kind of stuck with it now, so I have to finish this project because it's all in. I can't just switch it into AWS because it's proprietary Google stuff. But I am truly liking it, otherwise I wouldn't get on stage and talk about it. So if you have any questions, come grab me afterwards. I'm going to hang around, and I hope to have some good conversations with you. Thank you very much.